Good evening. Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee. My guest this evening is a gentleman by the name of Jeff Morgan.
Jeff Morgan.
I just met Jeff formally, but we ran into each other at a seminar a couple weeks ago.
Right.
But I'm going to start the show off a little differently than I've started my other shows.
Okay.
I have some things I want to get off my chest to hopefully preface what Jeff and I have to talk about today and share with you. In my view, there's been no question that this country has been involved in a cultural war characterized by attacks against institutions that formed the basis for the progress of this civilization. The family and family structure has been a focus of many of these attacks through the press, media, education, and sadly sometimes through legislation and court edicts.
Mm-hmm.
I may perhaps view these developments from a different perspective than that of most laypersons, as I've been worked in legal field for over 4 decades. It's 40 years. I'm old now. In fact, most of my practice focuses on the family law area. I am especially disappointed and sometimes outraged at the conduct, misconduct, lack of professionalism, and the incompetence of many family law professionals, including judges, attorneys, psychologists, psychiatrists, bar associations, and those who provide visitation of the services. In many respects, they appear to be nothing more than hustlers who prey on the vulnerable and actually traffic children and parents in family courts. The family court's virtual organized crime revolves around domestic violence, male supremacist organizations and ideas and attitudes, government programs, federal and state financing, and the trafficking of women and children in the family court system throughout America. The best interest of the child seemed like a trite phrase that's used to disguise these damnable practices in what is proclaimed to be the most civilized, the most advanced of civilization that ever existed on earth. This is sad to me, but I believe that is what's happening. I believe there's been an attack on the family,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that you may have seen, you can see Jeff Morgan on the videos that he has. His focus is also on the family, just as mine is.
That's right.
That's what I'm focusing on this season because I think the family is crucial.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my introduction, you saw some of my family.
Yes.
I say some of it because I have over, counting all the nieces and nephews I have and all those people, it's over. My baby brother and I, we stopped counting when we got over to 100.
Okay.
It's probably more than, it's certainly more than that.
Yeah.
But Jeff, I want to welcome you to the show, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I want my audience, first of all, for you to tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Jeff Morgan. I'm actually from Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania. When I was in high school, and this happened basically because of my parents' divorce. My parents got divorced. My father received the notification that they were divorced on my 16th birthday. As a teenager, I was crushed, to see your parents living in 2 different households. It was a family that was designed to be together. And then all of a sudden, it's not together anymore. And, it led me to a lot of searching, for myself. There was a deep hole in my heart. There's times that you get angry inside because of divorce. Your parents, your family's supposed to be together, and we saw the destruction of our family. And during that time then, 17 to 18, that area is when I started to really seek after, what is the purpose and meaning in life and everything. So I became a Christian in high school. And I will tell you that actually changed my life, and I thank God. Sometimes he uses crises or things like divorce to bring people closer to him. Sometimes divorce actually destroys people too. Mm-hmm. But in my case, I will say that it caused me to seek after Christ. And eventually then I said, okay, my life is now his. I went to Bible college. I said I want to go into missions. I want to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I went to Bible college. I met the lady who I married up there. After that, I went into the Army for 4 years and went to seminary, was an assistant pastor for a time, and eventually we got to the Middle East as missionaries in the country of Jordan among Iraqi refugees. Now, we were there for 5 years. From 1999 to 2004, I came back to the States. Things were going on in the country that really caused some concern with me. I saw things that were happening that I thought, here I am supposed to be a missionary, but in order to protect my family, I wanted to almost pick up a rifle or something like that. I said, because the military stuff is in you as well. I said, this is not working out the way that it should for me. I have this conflict. It's probably best for me to go back. So that's what I did, and you know, I think probably the best event after that was in 2012. I was a grassroots coordinator for the grassroots campaigner for the Rick Santorum campaign. I was credited with winning a few states. But one of the things I always appreciated about Rick is that, you know, he fought for the life of unborn children. He was the one who was largely responsible to get partial birth abortion abolished. And he always talked about the family, the importance of the family. The first economy is the family. The biggest issue that we're facing in America is the breakdown of the family. You fix the family, and a lot of these other issues start to decrease. It's the breakdown of the family that causes a lot of these problems.
Okay. You kind of were exactly where I am, because I believe that the family is the foundation.
Right.
The
It is
way
the
I see it.
foundation.
And if you want to me, if you want to destroy society or civilization, the best way to do it is to destroy the family.
Yeah. And let me, you know, as long as you're saying that, because I know we're going to talk about the issue of unilateral divorce, but when in the Bolsheviks, when Vladimir Lenin was in Bolshevik Russia, one of the things he decided to do was he had to attack the family. He had to abolish the family. Because why? Strong families are one of the best preservations for liberty and freedom. Strong families are what we need to enable us to have limited government. Well, if you're trying to impose communism on a society, you've got an institution, the family, that will oppose you. So how do you break that down? And one of the things he did, he created what was called unilateral divorce. It basically gave any person the right to divorce his spouse or her spouse for any reason, for no reason. And that was designed to abolish the family. It caused such huge problems that there became a national debate over whether this was good for society or bad for society. But what really I don't understand is that in America, we saw the failure of that model in Bolshevik Russia, and yet that is basically what we have now in our divorce courts, in our family courts in America. We have taken the Bolshevik model to destroy the family, and we've imported that to America. That's what we're trying to change this year, at least in the state of Texas.
Well, you know what I see, Jeff, on top of that is the family now can be 2 men and a dog, 2 women and a dog, any 2 people and a dog.
Yeah.
And I fear that one day it could be a man and a dog, or a man and a horse, a man and a cow,
Yeah.
mule, or whatever you want.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because right now there are some people in this upcoming session, in our Texas Constitution, it says that, you know, marriage is between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
It's not between a man and a dog, or
Not
3
yet.
men and a woman, or, you know, what. No, right. They're trying to change that. And I hope that we stay firm, because as a state, we have the right to define what marriage is. And what would happen is, if that gets changed, what happens if some Supreme Court decision gets backed down? We want to make sure that our Constitution is intact, that marriage is still defined as the relationship of a man and a woman. But what we've missed a lot of times is that if you look back to the relationship between a man and a woman, it used to be that a man and a woman would come together for life, and this was the unit in which children were brought into the world. Marriage is a protection for children and for the family. Marriage is for the family, divorce is for adults, and children should be before adults.
Strange, because even in my family, of course, we've had marriages and divorces in my family,
Right.
but when people when my older brothers and sisters divorced, whoever they were married to, we treated divorce. That divorce was between them. That didn't involve us.
Right.
Because we still treat them just like we always treat them.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I think the same thing. You know, first off, we're never going to eliminate divorce, but there are steps that we can take to reduce divorce. And what really is a shame is when you see things happen with divorce. And I'm in general, I think I'm not for divorce on demand, obviously. I know divorce does happen at times, but why does that mean that you have to destroy extended family? Or as you said, you know, you might have had a relationship with your sister-in-law or a brother-in-law. Why should you have to choose sides in that situation?
Well, we've always maintained those relations, but what I see in our culture that disturbs me is just the whittling away of what makes sense.
Right.
I mean, what's common sense? What's right in front of you?
Yeah.
We have now. It's like you can choose your gender. That's insane.
Yeah. It is insane.
I mean, I know in the 50s it was insane, but somewhere along the line, the liberals got a hold of it, and now it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, when you start talking about some of these issues, they are direct attacks on the family as well. And here's, it might take me a moment to get to the point here, but you know, the best environment for a child in almost every instance, and the vast majority of instances, is to be raised in an intact family with his natural mother and natural father. Two men cannot have a child together. Two women cannot have a child together. They have to get a child from a union of a man and a woman. And, you know, there is something about the nature of the family, and I'm going to say it's God ordained, because as a Christian, that's what I believe, is that, you know, God brought the family. It was the first institution. The family existed before the church existed. And if you look in the Old Testament, God is very adamant that, you know, a man and a woman are supposed to stay together, because in Malachi it says he wanted to see godly offspring. So even God himself knows, he says, you know, in order to see these children grow up to be everything that they should become, it takes a man and a woman working together. And what I see happening today is, if you have, say, same-sex couples that are getting children, now you have a child who obviously is not with one of his parents or her parents, because you can't have a man and a man creating a child, or a woman and a woman creating a child. So that child is losing part of his identity, and in a sense, you're basically saying parents aren't that important. And yet, from a Christian perspective, we would say parents are important, because it's the union of a man and a woman that the child is born into that family. And I don't know if you follow me where I'm going with that or not.
You know, another thing that disturbs me, Jeff, is in too many instances, the state and government gets involved in what should be family matters.
Right.
I mean, they dictate how many bedrooms you have to have for how many children.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that in my mom and dad's house, with 11 kids in 3 bedrooms, we would have been in violation of something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's insane.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. And I understand, in a sense, when the state is saying, okay, we've seen problems, because there are problems in our society, and sometimes those issues can contribute to problems. So I could see the state saying we have an interest in this, but I do also at the same time agree that they do get themselves involved in family matters where they should not be involved. And the state is not the parent of the child. The parents are the parents of the child. And that's when we start to, the states are going to now dictate what a good parent can do, what a good parent does, what a good parent might believe or think. A good parent may not homeschool the child. I mean, they have their own definitions of a good parent. And but really, it is the parents who are the parents of the child. I hear where you're going with it. I don't, personally, I understand when the state says we have some concerns and interests, but it should be to keep the family together. Right. My biggest concern is when the state comes in and says, like as in the state of Texas, we can decree your family divorced and broken for any reason, for no reason. One person can make up a reason, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have no defense. And that's my issue with the state. Why is the state breaking up families? I can go into that further, but I don't want to hog the conversation right now.
Now, there's some legislation that's coming up in the legislation this session.
Right.
Let's talk about that for a second.
So there are 2 bills that are coming up, and I actually have them right here with me. One of them is House Bill 922. And House Bill 922, what it says is this: in the Texas Family Code, Section 6.001. Well, first off, let me back up a little bit, because the first 50 pages or so of the Texas Family Code talks about marriage and the ceremony and everything else. And then it comes down to the issue of divorce. And, here, the marriage is so important. You have to have a ceremony by a certain person. You've got to have a license. You've got to be filled out at a certain time. Very, very important. But then in Section 6.001, currently, insupportability says, on the petition of either party to a marriage, the court may grant a divorce without regard to fault.
That's no fault.
That's no fault. But, so this is the issue that we're saying. Number one, there's a lot of problems with this, and I'm sure you as an attorney would understand this. Could you define for me what insupportability is? Nobody knows.
I don't think it's defined. I
It's
don't
not
think
defined.
it's even defined in the statute.
It's not defined. In fact, I could talk about this afterwards. The best interest of the child is not defined in the statute. The best interest of the child is used about 140 times in the Texas Family Code. Not once is it actually defined anywhere, which is a huge issue. So basically what one person is saying is, I think I know the best interest of the child, you know the best interest of the child. The only person who doesn't know the best interest of the child is the parent, by the way. But
Unfortunately, in too many occasions, in too many situations, the best interest of the child is what some judge thinks.
exactly, a judge who doesn't know anything.
Who has no training in child development psychology.
Absolutely. And does not even know the child. Maybe has never met the child. Maybe has met the child for 5 or 10 minutes versus parents who've been with that child when the child has been sick at night, who's been there for the first day of school, who's sacrificed and who's loved that child. And somehow a judge comes in and says, I am going to magically be infused with wisdom from on high, and I'm going to declare the best interest of the child. And yet another judge may say, well, I'm sorry, but no, that's not the best interest of the child. It's an undefined standard.
Jeff, the other thing that disturbs me from the standpoint of being an attorney and a litigator for too many years is there's really, somehow this judge is supposed to discern what's the best interest of the child by hearing two different sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, I've had a judge in the mediation tell me, I believe that they believe both sides are lying,
Yeah.
and somehow
Yeah.
you can discern what's true.
Yeah.
One side could be telling the whole truth, the
Yeah.
other side could be lying.
Yeah.
But to me, the beauty, I think, of Texas, and one thing I like about Texas, when it comes down to issues of custody, you can actually have a jury decide.
Yeah. So here's what I say the best interest of the child is. I mean, I'm going to say that the best interest of the child in almost every situation is to be raised in an intact family with his natural mother and father, period. Anything else you're talking about after divorce is not the best interest of the child, almost in every instance. Well, we're going to decree a divorce and now we're going to look out for the best interest of the child. You're lying. The best interest of the child would be to say, no, parents, figure this out, work it out, because the best interest of the child is for you to fix your problems and to raise this child in an intact family. That is the best interest of the child. But the Texas Family Code never defines the best interest of the child, so it becomes a whim. It becomes what an attorney might think, what a social worker might think, what a guardian ad litem might think, what who knows who might think. Everybody knows except the parent. And I say, let's put some definition to the best interest of the child in almost every instance, and this has been proven again and again by research and studies. The best interest of the child is to be raised in an intact family with his or her natural mother and father. And by the way, the American Academy of Pediatricians actually wrote out a paper on this, in which they said public policy should reflect the fact that they didn't use the best interest of the child, but it is in the best interest of the child for divorce to be reduced, for parents to stay together. Because even in the so-called good divorces, of which there are very few, the good divorces, you still are impacting the child. There is something that goes on. In fact, Elizabeth Marquette, she wrote a book, it's called Between Two Worlds, and hers was a little bit different because she took people who were relatively successful, people that had college graduates, children of divorce. Now, she compared two different groups. The children of divorce who were reasonably successful, and children from intact family who were reasonably successful. There was a huge difference nevertheless. You can be successful, but still have a lot of issues on the inside. And she was saying that, in her own life, it's like her childhood died. Once her parents got divorced, her childhood died. You talk with children of divorce. In many instances, they say when divorce took place, something happened. Some people that have been, people of faith have said, how can God let this happen to my family? That what kind of a God is this that will let my family be torn apart? And children deal with it in different ways. Some people are resilient and they go through it. But the lie is that all children are resilient. Children are not resilient, they're broken and they're being crushed. But the adults want to be happy. So the adults will be happy and they won't realize what's happening to their parents. In fact, I would say this. Let me take this one step further. Sorry for talking so much right now.
So the children are being sacrificed, essentially.
They are being sacrificed. And, I don't know if people, I went to a restaurant one time with my wife, and I went into the men's room, and in the men's room it said this: drinking alcohol can be dangerous to the unborn child. Well, okay, I'm not going to get pregnant, but so I don't know why it's in the men's room, but they wanted to warn me that drinking alcohol would be dangerous to the unborn child. You have the cigarette packages. They have a label. A surgeon general has determined that, cigarette smoking is hazardous to your health. What I think we ought to do is in every single divorce attorney's office, we should have a sign, and they should be forced to read and sign these disclosures that say, if you get divorced, these are the things your children are going to be at greater risk for. You might get your divorce, but your child is going to be more likely to engage in illicit sexual activity. Your daughter's going to be more likely to get pregnant out of wedlock. Your child will be more likely to end up in a prison, in a gang, to drop out of school, to never reach the upper 20% of income producers. Your child is more likely to have health problems. Your child is more likely, by a huge factor, to be trafficked by human trafficking. Every single malady in our society is heightened in a child who sees his parents split up. And I'm not saying that in every instance it happens, but generally speaking, because the best interest of the child in almost every case is to be raised in an intact family with his or her natural mother or father, you split up the family unit and you do something that you make that child more vulnerable to risks and risky behaviors in his or her life. So.
Well, I think that I've had a case, this was years ago, and I came to be very concerned about the judge.
Yeah.
And the judge made a ruling that I didn't understand. I was completely baffled. Now, my client was happy because he didn't have to pay child support.
Yeah, yeah.
But the judge, he was in the house. The judge moved him out of the house. The wife had left him in the house with 2 kids.
Yeah.
She was out, had her own separate apartment. The judge in a temporary hearing ordered him out of the house. Yeah. Ordered the mama back in the house, but did not order him to pay child support. And I didn't know what to think.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I asked an older attorney who was around at the time, what's going on? And he says, he asked me, did I know about the judge's background? I said, no. He says, did you know this judge, when he was a child, he ran away from home and joined the circus? And I started thinking, I said, now this man ran away from home and joined the circus, and this man is now deciding what happens to families? Yeah. That makes no sense.
Yeah, and yes, you're right. And I've talked with so many people, and again, I'm not talking about people I'm talking about people that actually have made it through life, but they talk about still, even though they are successful, the impact that divorce had on their lives. And sometimes it's because of a decision of a judge, like you were saying. But do you mind if I go back to this?
Sure, go ahead.
So there's 2 bills right now, and these are sponsored by Matthew Krause. He's the representative. Now let me tell you how we got in touch with Matthew Krause. In 2013, I went through a divorce in 2012, and nobody thought the divorce ever should have happened. That was the reality. But it did happen, and what I was shocked, Mike, because I had no defense. I'm being sued by my wife for divorce, and she even afterwards said, I was hoping for reconciliation at the end. I'm like, well, why are you doing this? It was the most insane thing I'd ever seen. But, she claimed irreconcilable differences. And I've got my signature. I never claimed that. But I had to, give up all my property and everything else like that. But what happens in House Bill 922, the insupportability issue says this: on the petition of either party to a marriage, the court may grant a divorce. Right now, the court always grants a divorce. The court may grant a divorce without regard to fault if both parties to the marriage agree that the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict of personalities that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. So what is nice about this is that
so it wouldn't be unilateral.
It's not unilateral. And some people might think, well, that's really, how can you do this? Currently, we have South Dakota and Mississippi. They allow no-fault divorce if it is mutual. Right. If there's a mutual decision. But what happens in the state of Texas and every state in the country is that no-fault divorce is forced divorce. It's unilateral divorce. If I'm married to my wife and I want a divorce, I can exploit her. I can say, you know what, sorry, but I'm looking for a younger model. She can say the same thing to me and say, hey, you know what, I met somebody, he's got more money and he's smarter and more attractive than you. But I'm like, well, okay, what is my crime? You're being sued. what am I being sued? What did I do? Did I commit a crime? And when I was going through divorce, I kept on thinking to myself, Mike, if I were accused of being a rapist or a murderer, I would have the presumption of innocence.
At least you have a say.
Yeah, could say, wait a minute, now we get a chance to prove this. No, I wasn't there. There's no DNA there. There's no picture of me being there. I didn't do this. And they can say you're innocent. But in divorce, they say, you're guilty. Well, what's the evidence? We don't need any evidence. Your wife is unhappy and she claims insupportability. Everybody around us said, nobody believed it. But on the basis of her testimony, which really was a pretty weak testimony, to be honest, the judge granted a divorce, destroyed the family. And I think we have to look at family policy, and say it's not just the through the eyes of the two adults. We have to look at it through the lens of family.
Well, looking at it from a legal perspective, I just have a question. There's a question in my mind whether or not in an adversarial proceeding, whether the best interest of the child can conceivably be first at all.
It cannot be first. And that's what people say that, and I've heard a lot of attorneys, the divorce attorneys in particular, say this. Well, they just need to grow up and get over it. So in other words, I've committed to a person for my lifetime, and we've said we've worked together for my ex-wife and I was 25 years that, we'd been married and everything. And, been missionaries together, been a whole lot of things together. Yes, you go through struggles, you go through tough times, whatever, but you're going to go together with life. And all of a sudden somebody's going to say, okay, she wants out, so we're going to let her out. And I'm saying, wait a minute, we have this many years together, we built our family like this. And the thing is, Mike, what they've shown again and again, it's the marriages in which insupportability, no fault is claimed, which the kids are shocked over. They're like, this doesn't need to take place. It hurts those kids more in the long run. But the state of Texas, this is their policy. And not only that, the state of Texas always, without exception, 100% of the time, sides with the person who wants a divorce. And that's very easy to prove because all you have to do is over the last 5 years, if you can show me 5 instances, just give me 3 instances over the last 5 years in which somebody said, wait a minute, I don't believe our marriage is insupportable. And the judge said, okay, I'm going to deny the divorce. It never happens. All it takes is an accusation. There's no due process. There's no equal protection under the law. We look at marriage as being a contract. The contract clause of the United States Constitution says that the state should do nothing to impair the obligation of contracts. There are so many constitutional and legal violations that take place in our family court that it's incredible. Now, this bill, because it would say mutual consent, what it does, it gives protection to a spouse who says, wait a minute, I don't believe that our marriage is irreconcilable. In fact, I'm even surprised that you're filing for divorce. What did I do?
Well, it gives you a chance to try to preserve the family.
Right. And that was the original intent of the idea behind no fault. If you go back to California, what they had going on at the same time, no fault was never supposed to be divorce on demand. It was supposed to be an opportunity that, we're going to diffuse the tension. We're going to give this husband and wife an opportunity to help restore their marriage, to help keep the family together. That was the intent, so that they could help save marriages. And in California, they actually had a tract that was very successful doing that. But then after it got passed, it was marketed as this, but then after it got passed, it became divorce on demand, divorce for any reason or for no reason. I can force divorce on you, spread like wildfire. That's why if you look at the divorce rate from after Ronald Reagan signed it into law until, it went skyrocketing. Now it started to just come down a bit, but the other thing is that, you have a lot of men and women right now who are postponing marriage. They're delaying marriage. They're cohabiting. They're having kids, but I'm not getting married. I've seen what's already happened in these divorce courts. That is not for the good of society. It's not for the good of the children. It does not create any type of security. And marriage is a sacred bond. It is something that if two people, for example, meet in a church and they say, we are committing ourselves to God, we're taking a vow to God, why is the state saying, oh, that's okay, but your vow to God doesn't mean anything? This is crazy. It becomes a religious liberty issue. It becomes an issue that, why does this serve the purpose of the state? Because if in a criminal, if there's a case, a civil case, or a case dealing with fundamental rights, the state cannot just say, we're going to just wipe out all of your rights or something. It's got to find a solution in the least invasive way. And yet what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to destroy this marriage. There's a difference between a sick marriage and a dead marriage. A sick marriage, you go and you can see somebody and say, like, if I'm sick and I go to the doctor and the doctor says, here's some medicine, do this,
Try to do something to make it better.
it's going to make it better. But what would it be like is every time I was sick, the doctor said, well, I'm going to give you a lethal injection. And I ran, but this is the execution chamber of divorce.
You checking out.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, I'm never going back to the doctors again.
I have a cold. Well, it's time for you to get up out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But that's what happens. And I think you agree with me. In the family courts, that's exactly what happens. There needs to be two different approaches. There are instances where divorce is a remedy. I will grant that. But divorce is so easy. The interesting thing, Mike, is that there is a judge, Supreme Court judge out of Georgia. Her name is Leah Ward Sears. She was working with a family therapist out of the University of Minnesota, William Daugherty, and they put this forth, the Second Chance Act. And it was basically to try to say, we've got to reduce the divorce rate. We've got to give these couples a chance at divorce, because they said even after they were very much into the conflict and the attorneys are filing things and trying to create bitterness, because that's how the attorneys make their money. The attorneys are trying to destroy a family. Either one of them, sometimes both of them, are saying, can we maybe get off this exit ramp? Can we take an exit ramp? Can we take a breather? Can we try to work this out? And often, I'm not saying in every case, but sometimes, and I would say often, the divorce attorneys are instigating things. I've talked with people, Mike, and they've said, we were on the verge of reconciling, and my husband's divorce attorney said it's a trick.
Well, the attorneys get paid. The attorneys get paid by creating animosity.
Right. Right.
And I believe that if most married couples that hit those rough spots, that you're going to hit sometimes.
Yeah.
Because people are people.
Yeah.
But if counseling or something like was required, at least required before you could get no fault. So-called no-fault divorce.
Yeah, and this is what the family laws attorney will tell you, and they lie to you, by the way. I've watched the testimony. I've been down there. In 2017, I testified, and I was watching the Texas Family Law Foundation representative getting up there, lying to the representatives. And I've put the videos out online and everything. But she's saying, well, all they have to do is ask for counseling, and the judge will give it. That is a lie, too. The judge may give it. But
he may not.
It may not, and oftentimes won't. And the reality, Mike, is that you're going through this stuff. You don't know what your rights are. But, if you hire a divorce attorney for a mere $350 or $400 an hour, they'll walk you through the process. But the thing is, in the Texas Family Code, there is really no defense. There is a section, defenses against divorce, and there's only one defense. And this would be the example. It's called, condoning, condonation. So in other words, if I say to my wife, hey, you know what, I really like her, I'd like to go sleep with her, and my wife's like, go ahead, it's okay with me. Or she says the same thing to me, you know what, I really like this guy, and I'd really like to have sex with him. I said, well, go ahead, it's okay with me. Now, I cannot therefore get a divorce from her, nor can she get a divorce from me because of adultery, because I've condoned it. That is the only defense you have. Other than that, it's like, boom, Saddam Hussein would have these mock, and I say this because as I said, I was a missionary in Jordan among Iraqi refugees. I used to watch some of the things. Saddam Hussein would have these mock trials, and he would call a name, he'd find the person guilty, they take him out and they shoot him. This is your Texas family courts today. That's the reality. So the House Bill 922 would help to stop that, would give at least the vulnerable person an opportunity to say, wait a minute, I object. I don't think that our marriage is hit the rocks. I don't
So
think.
you're talking about 6 months as opposed to
So that's in House Bill 926 now. And
60 days.
yes. So right now in Texas, if somebody files for divorce,
Was that filed last session?
it was filed last
How far
section.
did it get?
So the interesting thing is the House Bill, it was called House Bill 65, and that was to extend the waiting period from 60 days to 180 days. And it passed out of committee unanimously. It was a bipartisan committee, Republicans and Democrats. It had 22 co-sponsors. Every single person who heard it said this is a good bill. It passed out. But they never got it to the floor for a vote. And that was a shame because it's reasonable. Mike, if you're married for 20 years, it's not reasonable to expect people to somehow settle everything in 60 days. especially if one person is saying, wait a minute, I don't even want the divorce. Well, you've got to settle. And, and I mean, I'll tell you, Mike, because this happened to me. My ex-wife's divorce attorney, and I'll mention his name because I don't mind, let him have a little sunshine on him. His name was Charles Schurenberg. And, basically he's like,
sunlight is the best disinfectant.
yeah, yeah. And he was one of the most ethical attorneys in Mesquite. But I mean, he's out there and if I don't, I'm getting threatened by these things. If I don't sign, they're going to do this. It's going to cost us so much money. And Mike, when you're going through this, again, you have no defense. So basically, you've got to say, if I try to defend myself, you're still going to lose. So you might have spent $30,000 and you lose. And then, by the way, because the Texas Family Code says, well, maybe your wife or your husband doesn't have the money to pay, the judge can say, well, now you get to pay for her bill or his bill too, because the attorneys need to be paid. So there's no disincentive to the attorneys. And Mike, if this were a medical practice, could you imagine how many malpractice suits would be fired against an MD if they were killing somebody who was just sick, giving them a drug that administers euthanasia to them? But the divorce attorneys, they have no accountability. And the reality is, as you were saying, they want a little conflict because it's a little bit more billable hours.
Yeah, you file this motion,
Right.
There's more money.
Right. And by the way, so the first thing we do, you go in there and say, so what is your balance sheet? So you've got $400,000. So there was an unwritten, one guy told me in California, there was an unwritten law among the attorneys. It was never written down. But we can take up to 40% of that for ourselves. It'll hurt them, but they won't come back and kill us over it. We can go to 40%. So, they've got 400,000. That means 160,000. We'll go a little bit less than that for a little bit of cushion. So maybe it will cost them $145,000, $150,000. It's going to hurt them, but and we'll pretend that we're fighting for them.
But they'll live.
But they'll live. And you know what? They can also take a look and say, oh, you've got a college fund for your kids. You know what? My kid needs a college fund. Your kid doesn't need it as much as my kid. They are helping to destroy families. And they're saying, they talk about the best interest of the child after they've also destroyed the child's college fund. So the thing with House Bill 926 is that it would give the person who's being subject to a no-fault divorce the breathing room that they need to say, hey, we're not going to, you don't have to do this in 60 days. First off, you can only, the divorce will only be effectual if it's mutual consent. The second thing is, you don't have to feel like you're under time pressure right away. And six months really even is not that much time.
Right.
So, but anyway.
That's why I figured it probably came out of committee because 180 days is you have that in Title VII claims. 180 days is around in a few places.
Yeah.
More than a few places.
Yeah. But I mean, if say, you're in a process of a divorce and you've got children, and now you've got to find a new apartment. You've got to say, okay, now I've got to buy extra beds for the kids or whatever it may be, and then where are the kids going to go to school? And in many instances, and
you can approach things in a more rational, reasonable kind of way.
Right. Because when you're forced, you make bad decisions at a very emotionally tumultuous time. And then the moment you do something, somebody's going to say, well, you signed it. Forget about the fact that you were under duress and everything else, but you signed it. And by the way, if you don't sign it, it's going to cost you more money.
And Jeff, that's why I say, to me, many of the problems that exist in this arena can be solved if lawyers and judges and other divorce professionals approach the thing not from the standpoint of just grabbing money. Right. But that you're actually affecting and impacting lives. Yeah. So because the fact that you're dealing with live people gets lost in the fuss.
So the Texas Family Law Foundation, I don't know if you saw this video or not, but in February of 2017, the president of the Texas Family Law Foundation got in front of the Juvenile Services and Family Issues Committee in the House. And the president's up there and she's saying one of the things that she is most proud of is being a lobbyist for the Texas Family Bar. What is the purpose of a lobbyist? To protect the financial interest of the people they're representing. You know,
protects financial interests of the people who paying them.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if I were a lobbyist for a tobacco company, you would look at me like, you know, you're trying to make sure that your cigarettes get out there at the expense of the health of my kids. You have divorce attorneys and the Texas Family Law Foundation. They're going to protect the financial interests of the divorce attorneys, not just at the expense of the health of your kids, but perhaps their social life, their emotional, everything. I mean, people don't talk about suicides that take place because of divorce and stuff like that. And somehow it's the parents' fault. These people that are advocating easy divorce, and the Texas Family Law Foundation will be up there, Michael. They will be up there and they will be defending why we should not change the divorce laws. Because if we change the divorce laws, all of a sudden their income could go like this.
It affects your pocketbook.
Right, right. But at the same time, the health of our kids may go like this. So, you know, it doesn't make a difference. We're talking about the best interest of the children. Really, we're talking about the best interest of the pocketbook.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, you know as well, many people that go through divorce, that all of a sudden you're both wonderful parents until somebody files for divorce, and now the attorney says, oh, but we've got to get you the kids. So you've got to turn your spouse into this evil person. You've got to denigrate him or her, and one person is going to come out of this arena as the victor,
Right.
with the kids and the child support, by the way,
Right.
and the other person is going to be a visitor.
That's why I say in my real purest view,
Yeah.
an adversarial proceeding is not the place to be resolving family issues.
Right. Right.
Because you get emotions and all that kind of
Right.
thing involved. And
Right.
Then you got attorneys who
Yeah.
want to get money, and
Yeah.
psychiatrists want to get paid, psychologists, therapists.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
So, in my opinion, this is that if, and you know, right now the Texas Family Code will tell you about, you know, if you go through these evaluations and so on, who gets to pay and stuff like that. If the Texas Family Code permits this type of a divorce, insupportability, which basically says for any reason, for no reason, you can make up a reason, because we all know that in family court, perjury does not get, yeah, but you know, then we ought to be telling the taxpayers, okay, you know what? This is what you are permitting. You get stuck with the bill. Why should these people get punished? Why should an innocent person get punished with a bill that may be $50,000, $100,000 for all of this stuff? You know, it's part of the divorce apparatus. It's the divorce industry. You know, we talk about big pharmacy, we talk about big tobacco, whatever it may be.
It's a racket.
Divorce
It's a racket.
It is a racket, and you know that's why I would like to say, the divorce industry actually needs to be regulated. Look, in banking, we have regulations for banks. Why? So that they don't bilk people out of their money. They have, you know, UDAP, the Unfair and Deceptive Acts procedure. Why don't we make the attorneys do this? Why don't we have a place where, you know what, just like banks, if there is a, you know, if the bank does something, they can file it with a regulatory agency. Let's have a regulatory agency for the divorce attorneys and let them be, because right now, they can do anything they want. In fact, it's in their best interest.
To put in the partnership that I have heard, and I've been around after 40 years, it's whatever the road will bear.
Yeah.
Whatever the road will bear, that is what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's fair or right and all that stuff, but I know it can have some very negative effects on people and people's lives.
Absolutely.
And as I said, it's what's lost in all of this are lives.
Yes. So let me just say, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, that's the parents, it's whatever, it's the family. But I've got this, there's a pamphlet that was put out called The Taxpayer Cost of Divorce and Unwed Childbearing. Now, people say, well, I don't want to pay so much in taxes. Well, you know what, people out there, you are subsidizing divorce and childbearing and unwed childbearing. You just are not being told. Every time that there's a divorce, consider that your tax bill is going up. You're actually subsidizing this. And this was a report done by Benjamin Scafidi. He's an economist out of the J. Whitney Bunting School of Business at Georgia College and State University. This is in 2008. He went through he gave all of his assumptions on how he came to this figure, but he said divorce and unwed childbearing cost taxpayers, not the people, taxpayers, at least $112 billion a year, at least every single year. And he said, really, the figure is probably much higher, maybe like 165 billion. The cost of a Hurricane Harvey every single year is what you're paying as a taxpayer over 10 years, between 1.1 and 1.6 trillion dollars is what you're paying
Jeez.
to subsidize divorce and unwed childbearing. If you aren't concerned about this, I'm not sure why. I mean, imagine having that, you know, why am I having to pay for somebody else's divorce and their unwed childbearing? But this is what's happening. It's affecting your pocketbook. And the reality is as well, this study was done in 2008. This is now 2019. I don't know how much it has increased since then, but I've got to say that it's gone up to more than that. In Texas, in the year 2008, it was approximately a little bit under $4 billion.
Now that would be a purported tangible cost. The intangible costs in lives cannot be calculated.
Absolutely. We're talking about just the taxpayer burden.
Right.
We are not talking about the intangibles. And you know, when I went through divorce, Mike, I mean, I was at work and I had some projects, and I just said, fortunately, I had a place that really helped me out. I said, listen, I can't do this right now. You know, it's tearing me up. I'm trying to keep my family together. Again, I didn't know I had no defense. I could not believe how unjust it was. But I mean, and nobody thought it should have happened. Nobody. But yet at the same time, I'm going through this stuff, and I mean, it's putting me into turmoil, because I'm looking and I'm saying, this is what's going to happen to my family. And I'll tell you, Mike, you know, my ex-wife filed for divorce. Within 2 weeks, my daughter was pregnant. You don't tell me that there's no cause and effect there.
The example I gave to you some time ago at the beginning of the show about the judge who was joined the circus.
Yes.
When he moved the lady out, moved the man out, and moved the lady in who had moved out. When I went to talk to that judge, and I said, I told him, I said, he got mad at me.
Yeah.
And I just told him, I said, Your Honor, in 6 months, that teenage girl will be pregnant, and that little boy and that young man will have somebody pregnant. That's exactly what happened.
Yep. And you know, and here, you know, the Saturday I was downtown in Austin, and you know, there was the March for Life. And I know that people may have different views on this, but you know, the idea about abortion. What I tell people who are pro-life is that if you are pro-life, you need to be for this repeal of unilateral no-fault divorce, because when you have children of divorce, especially daughters of divorce, they are more susceptible to getting pregnant,
more likely to have
and
early pregnancies,
and also more likely to end up with abortions, because they don't have the same support system. And many times the parents are trying to figure out things. The children are on their own. If you want to reduce abortion, reduce divorce. If you want to reduce poverty, reduce divorce. If you want to reduce gang activity, reduce divorce. If you want to reduce high school dropouts, reduce divorce. If you name it.
So there are a number of problems that can be fixed if we fix the family.
Absolutely. And the two bills that Matthew Krause is sponsoring, they are just mild bills. They aren't extreme. Extreme is to say that one person who's entered into a marriage willingly with another person can at any time or no time, anytime for any reason, say, I want out, and that's it. And there's no basis for it, and the destruction of families that accompanies it, that is unreasonable, that we would say for any reason, for no reason, one person can make an allegation because maybe she's met somebody new or he's met somebody new. You know, you can file for divorce based on adultery. You don't have to. And I know of many people, maybe you do too, that have gone through those times of infidelity and they've come out stronger. You know, they've gone through those times and they said, you know, we were able to forgive each other. And as you know, in marriage, you will always have instances where there is a conflict that you have to work through. So you have, when you take for better or for worse, maybe infidelity is the worst. But you know what? If you, and I'm not saying that you have to, and I'm not saying that you should have to be married to a chronic serial adulterer or something like that, or somebody who's beating you. But for the most part, many divorces are needless. And that first study that I told you about, the second chance of the proposal to reduce unnecessary divorce, that's what they said. At least 40% of the divorces are unnecessary. I read a judge who said, in her opinion, and she presided over 4,000 divorces, she said at least 50% of the people who filed for the divorce didn't even want it. They just wanted to help strengthen the marriage. And they ended up divorced. And she said the state bears responsibility for this. So
that to me that puts more of a burden on judges to be perhaps a bit more circumspect about how they approach it.
absolutely. But what I hear too often, though, is judges taking umbrage behind the Texas Family Code. Well, we have to grant a divorce. Well, no, you don't have to, but they think that they do. And I'm saying if based on no evidence, you are going to destroy a family, you are not acting in a judicial capacity. You should be able to say, wait a minute, who says that there is no chance of reconciliation? The judge should say immediately, this is my opinion. If I were the judge, say, you know what, I'm not going to grant you the divorce because, number one, I am representing the state. And as the state, I have an interest in seeing your family stay together. Because if you split up, as the state and taxpayers in the state are going to be taking the responsibility for some of the stuff that you should be doing. I'm going to say, no, you know what? You need to go back and fix it. Try to fix it anyway. And that would be the bare minimum to say, okay, you know what? We're not going to do this. You need to prove your case. Why? Tell me why you should be divorced. But the judges say, oh, okay, for any reason, for no reason, we'll get you the divorce.
Yeah, it's just I just see to me the biggest concern for me would be the damage done to children because
Right.
they are not really represented in that.
They aren't.
You have the husband and the wife, and they have lawyers.
Yeah.
In some instances, you have an ad litem, but then that ad litem hadn't known the children for as long as they've been living.
Right. This was something, last Monday I was at a meeting with the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, and it was a presentation on human trafficking. So I knew he was going to be speaking, and I went to his website and I looked at the human trafficking. They had a great video out there, by the way. But what he said is that all children are at risk of being trafficked.
Yeah.
But there are some things that make them more vulnerable. And I looked through his thing and I said, what I see is this. All of these things that make children more vulnerable to human trafficking are the same things that you find in children of divorce. What is the state doing and what is your office doing to help address these issues? He told me, Mike, he said, we don't have the resources. They only give me attorneys. And this is where I'm saying, okay, I'm not saying that we can necessarily stop human trafficking because humans can be trafficked from any type of a family. But if we can strengthen the family, which is what you're talking about, how can we strengthen the family? We get an opportunity to strengthen our children. We get to reduce children that are vulnerable to human trafficking just by strengthening the family. And every other, like I said, every other social malady as well.
I think that this thing about family law, and when I went to law school, I was more interested in taxes and corporations and stuff. I thought family law was I thought criminal law was kind of sexy, but family law was not really.
Yeah.
But I've since rethought that in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I said, when you're dealing with the family, you're really dealing with what's really most important.
You are. But I've also heard among some attorneys saying that as far as in their profession, the family law attorneys are looked at like the scum of the profession.
It's like you're at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
But
you profit by destroying families.
Yeah, it's just that thing.
Yeah.
But Jeff, just about time to wrap up here.
Okay.
But I want to thank you for being on the show. And if you're ever in the area again on a Monday evening, you're always welcome back.
Well, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity here. This was wonderful. Thank you for whoever's listening and watching. Thank you so much. Mike, again, thank you for everything.
I have to give a special thank you to Rhonda Finney for putting us in contact with us so we can have this show. And she sweated us about a little bit, but everything's okay.
Everything turned out okay. Thanks so much. I
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much. God bless you.
God bless you.